Adaobi. Ada Okafor was the kind of woman who commanded admiration wherever she went. With her radiant smile and kind heart, she was known as the light of Umuagu village. She had been married to Chike, a man of vision and hard work, for 10 years. Together, they had built a beautiful life, complete with a flourishing farm and 2 children, 7-year-old Ifini and 5-year-old Amora. Their home was always filled with laughter. Chike would often return from the farm, hoisting Ifini onto his shoulders and spinning Amora in circles until she squealed with joy. Ada would watch from the veranda, her heart swelling with pride. Life was not just good, it was perfect. But fate had other plans. One fateful market day, Chike's cart overturned on a treacherous road near the riverbank. The news came as a whisper at first, then a wail that spread through the village like wildfire. Ada dropped the basket of yams she was carrying when a neighbor, her face pale and voice trembling, delivered the devastating news. "Chike, he's gone," the woman said softly. Ada's legs gave way, and she crumpled to the ground. Her world shattered in an instant. The days following the accident were a blur. Ada barely ate or slept, her heart heavy with grief. She clung to her children, who were too young to fully understand the weight of their loss. Ifini asked once, his small face serious, "Ma, when is Papa coming back?" Ada could only hold him tightly, her tears soaking his shirt. But mourning in Umuagu village came with its own challenges, especially for a widow. Among the mourners who filled her compound in the days after Chike's burial, Ada noticed the calculating eyes of her in-laws. Obiora, Chike's eldest brother, stood out the most. His sharp features and perpetual scowl gave him an air of menace. Ada had always found him intimidating, but she had no idea how much trouble he would bring into her life. One evening, barely a week after the funeral, Obiora gathered the family elders in Chike's compound. Ada was summoned to the gathering, her heart pounding as she sat on a low stool. The air was thick with tension. Obiora cleared his throat. "Ada," he began, his tone laced with feigned sympathy. "We understand your pain. Chike was our brother, and we grieve with you." Ada nodded cautiously, her instincts warning her to brace for what was coming. "But," Obiora continued, "you must understand that in our tradition, a woman does not own her husband's property. The land, the house, even the farm, all of it belongs to the family now." Ada's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying, Obiora?" "I'm saying," he replied, his voice cold and firm, "you don't belong here anymore. You can stay with your mother in Amigbu village. We will take care of everything here." The words hit Ada like a physical blow. She looked around, hoping for someone to defend her. But the elders avoided her gaze, their silence a confirmation of Obiora's claim. "This is my home," Ada said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Chike and I built this life together. I have nowhere else to go." Obiora's sneer deepened. "It is not about what you built, woman. It is about tradition. Do not embarrass yourself by resisting." Ada's heart sank, but she refused to cry in front of them. She thought of her children, of Ifini's curious eyes and Amora's innocent smile. They needed her to be strong. She stood, her hands trembling but her chin high. "I may be a widow, but I am still a mother. And I will not abandon my children to your mercy. If you want this property, you will have to take it by force." Obiora's eyes narrowed, and his lips curled into a cruel smile. "Don't worry, Ada," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "We will." That night, Ada sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her sleeping children. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating their peaceful faces. She knew the battle ahead would be fierce, but she vowed to protect them at all costs. "Chike," she whispered into the still night, "I don't know if I have the strength to face this. But for our children, I will fight. I will fight for what is rightfully ours." The storm had arrived, and Ada braced herself for the battles to come. The morning started with an unsettling stillness. Adeobi Ada Okafor had barely slept the night before. Her mind raced with thoughts of how to protect her children, Ifini and Amora, as well as the life she and her late husband, Chike, had built together. She had hoped, naively, that her in-laws would relent, that the elders would show compassion. But when she heard the shouts and the stomping of feet outside her compound, she realized her worst fears were coming true. "Open this door, Ada!" Obayora's deep voice boomed from outside. Ada clutched her sleeping children close to her chest. She whispered a prayer under her breath, her heart pounding like a drum. "Stay here," she instructed the children, pulling a thin shawl over her shoulders. When she opened the door, she was met with a hostile crowd. Obayora stood at the front, flanked by his two younger brothers, Emeka and Tochukwu. Behind them were several village elders, their faces stern and unreadable. A few curious neighbors had gathered at a distance, whispering among themselves. "Ada," Obayora began, his tone devoid of any warmth. "We gave you a chance to leave peacefully, but you have chosen to be stubborn." "I am not being stubborn, Obayora," Ada said, her voice shaking but firm. "This is my home. Chike and I built this together. My children and I have nowhere else to go." Obayora's lips curled into a sneer. "You are a woman. Women do not inherit property in our family. This house, the land, the farm, it all belongs to us now." One of the elders, a wiry man named Pa Nadi, stepped forward. "Ada," he said, his tone heavy with condescension, "it is our custom. A widow cannot claim her husband's property. You must respect the traditions of our people." Ada's eyes darted to Ngozi, Chike's elder sister, who stood slightly apart from the group. If anyone could speak on her behalf, it was Ngozi, who had once shared a close bond with her. Ada folded her hands in a pleading gesture. "Ngozi," she said, her voice cracking, "you know how much Chike loved his children. He would never want them to suffer. Please, help me. Speak for me." Ngozi met her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, Ada thought she saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Women don't inherit in this family," Ngozi said coldly. "You should leave before things get worse." Ada's heart shattered. She realized then that she was truly alone in this fight. Before she could respond, Obayora barked an order to his brothers. "Clear her things out." "No!" Ada screamed, rushing to block the door. But it was no use. Emeka and Tochukwu pushed past her, entering the house like a pair of wild dogs. They began tossing out her belongings, clothes, pots, and even the children's books. Amora and Ifini, awakened by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, their faces pale with fear. "Mama, what's happening?" Ifini asked, his voice trembling. "It's okay, my son," Ada said, kneeling to hold them close. "Everything will be fine. Mama is here." But her words felt hollow even to her own ears. The scene grew more chaotic. Neighbors watched silently, some shaking their heads in disapproval but too afraid to intervene. A few women whispered among themselves. "Poor Ada. She doesn't deserve this. But what can she do? Tradition is tradition." By midday, the house was stripped of all semblance of a home. Ada's belongings were piled haphazardly outside the compound. Obayora stood in the center of the chaos, his arms crossed, looking smug. "Take your things and leave," he said. "If you're still here by nightfall, we'll make you regret it." Ada wanted to scream, to fight, to make them understand the cruelty of their actions. But she knew she couldn't risk escalating the situation, not with her children at stake. With a heavy heart, she gathered her scattered belongings and placed them into a battered wheelbarrow lent to her by a sympathetic neighbor. She draped a shawl over her children to shield them from the scorching sun and began the long, humiliating walk to her mother's house in a Migbu village. The journey was agonizing, both physically and emotionally. Ifini trudged beside her, his small hand clutching hers tightly, while Amora sat atop the wheelbarrow, her face buried in her mother's wrapper. Ada kept her head high, refusing to let the tears fall in front of her children. When they finally arrived at her mother's house, an old mud brick hut with a thatched roof, Ada collapsed onto the mat laid out for her. Her mother, Mama Nkechi, fussed over her, bringing water and helping the children settle in. "Why didn't you tell me they were doing this to you?" Mama Nkechi asked, her voice thick with anger and sorrow. "I thought I could handle it," Ada whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought they would listen to reason." "You're too soft-hearted, Ada," her mother said, shaking her head. "Your kindness is not a weakness, but you must learn to fight for what is yours." That night, as her children slept on the mat beside her, Ada lay awake, staring at the thatched ceiling. She replayed the day's events in her mind, her anger simmering beneath her grief. "I will not let this be the end," she vowed silently. "I will find a way to rebuild. For Ifini. For Amora. For Chikaha's memory." The stars outside shone brightly, as if offering her a glimmer of hope. Ada closed her eyes, clutching her children close, and let determination settle in her heart. The sun rose slowly over Amigbu village, casting a warm glow over its modest huts and the surrounding farmlands. For Ada Okafor, the light brought little comfort. Each day felt like a mountain to climb, and every step forward was laden with uncertainty. Yet, as she stood in front of the small mud hut that now housed her and her children, she reminded herself of one thing: she had survived, and she still had her children. Her mother, Mama Nkechi, was a pillar of strength in those early days. "You are stronger than you think, Ada," she often said. "We will get through this together." But Mama Nkechi was old, her own resources limited. Ada knew she couldn't rely on her mother forever. The first thing Ada did was take stock of what she had left. Among the belongings she had managed to salvage were a few pieces of gold jewelry Chika had gifted her during their happier years. She held them in her hands one evening, their weight heavier with memories than gold. "Mama, what are those?" Ifini asked, sitting beside her. Ada forced a smile. "Something special your papa gave me." "Why don't you wear them?" the boy asked innocently. Ada swallowed hard. "Because they're more useful for something else." The next morning, Ada walked to the market with her jewelry wrapped in a faded handkerchief. She sold them for far less than they were worth, her heart breaking with each coin she received. But the money was enough to buy food for a few weeks and cover the children's school fees for the term. Life in Amigbu village was starkly different from the comfort and security Ada had known in Umuagu. Here, she was just another struggling widow trying to make ends meet. Her children attended the local school, a crumbling building with peeling paint and broken benches. Ifini, ever the curious and bright boy, adapted quickly. But Amora, younger and more sensitive, often clung to Ada when it was time to leave for school. "I don't like it, Mama," Amora whispered one morning. "I miss our old school." Ada knelt to face her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know, my darling. But this is where we are now. And as long as we're together, we'll be okay." One evening, as the children sat on a mat outside the hut, Ifini looked up from his homework. "Mama," he said, his voice tentative, "will we ever go back home?" Ada froze. She had been stirring a pot of soup, and for a moment, she couldn't find the words to respond. Her heart ached for the life they had lost, the farm, the laughter, the sense of belonging. But she couldn't let her son see her pain. She turned to him with a soft smile. "We will build a new home, my son," she said, her voice steady. "You'll see." "But what about Papa's house?" Ifini pressed. "Why can't we go back?" Ada knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, life takes us in a different direction," she said. "But that doesn't mean we can't find happiness where we are. Papa would want us to be strong, wouldn't he?" Ifini nodded slowly, his eyes filled with the kind of understanding that seemed too mature for a 7-year-old. That night, Ada sat outside her hut, watching the stars. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to dream of a better future, not just for her children, but for herself. "I will not let this be the end," she whispered, echoing the vow she had made on the night of her eviction. Starting over was hard, but Ada was determined to turn her pain into purpose. She would rebuild her life, brick by brick, fueled by the love she had for her children and the memory of the man she had lost. The road ahead was long, but Ada was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The first light of dawn crept into the small hut Ada now called home. Her children, Ifini and Amora, were still asleep, their small bodies curled up on the straw mat they shared. Ada sat by the window, a small wooden box in her lap. Inside it was a bundle of Naira notes Chike had secretly stashed for emergencies. He had always been cautious, a man who believed in preparing for the unexpected. As Ada counted the money, her mind raced with possibilities. The sum was small, just enough to start something modest, but it was more than nothing. "This is Chike's gift to us," she whispered, running her fingers over the faded notes. "I will make it count." Her decision was made, she would use the money to start a business. Something simple yet sustainable. She thought of akara and pap, a popular breakfast staple in a Migbu village. It was something she could make with skill, and people would always need food. The next day, Ada walked to the village market with her hidden savings tucked securely in a cloth bag. The market was bustling with activity, vendors shouting their prices, children weaving through the crowd, and the smell of roasted maize filling the air. Ada approached a stall where a woman sold beans and cornmeal. "Good morning, Mamankeru," Ada greeted. "Good morning, my daughter. What can I get you?" the woman asked, her face lighting up with a smile. "I need beans and cornmeal for pap," Ada said, careful not to reveal the full extent of her plans. Mamankeru measured the items while chatting. "You're new to the village, eh? I've seen you around. Tough times, I hear." Ada smiled faintly. "Yes, but we're managing." With her ingredients in hand, Ada returned home and began her work. The next morning, she woke before dawn, grinding beans into a smooth paste for the akara batter. She boiled the cornmeal into thick, creamy pap and prepared a small wooden tray to carry her goods to the village square. The village square was already lively when Ada arrived. She found a quiet corner and set up her tray. Her heart raced as she called out to passers-by, "Hot akara and pap. Freshly made." At first, people walked by without stopping. Ada's nerves grew with each passing minute. Then, a young man approached her stall, sniffing the air. "How much for a plate of akara and pap?" he asked. 50 naira, Ada replied, her voice steady despite her anxiety. The man handed over the money, and Ada served him. As he ate, others began to notice and gather around her stall. By mid-morning, she had sold out. Returning home that day, Ada felt a glimmer of hope. She counted her earnings with a smile, the weight of despair momentarily lifted. In the days that followed, Ada's akara business began to grow. Villagers praised the quality of her food, and she gained a small but loyal customer base. Her neighbor, Nena, often stopped by her stall to chat and offer encouragement. "You're brave, Ada," Nena said one morning as she bought a plate of akara. "Many women in your situation would have given up." Ada wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "My children need to eat. I cannot afford to give up." But not everyone was pleased with Ada's success. Rumors reached her ears that Obiora had heard about her business. "She's doing better than when she was with Chike," one villager whispered. This infuriated Obiora, who had expected Ada to crumble under the weight of her circumstances. He began to spread rumors of his own, questioning the source of her money. Where did she get the money to start a business? He asked anyone who would listen. Did she steal from Chike's savings before she left? The whispers reached Ada, but she refused to let them deter her. She focused on her children and her work, determined to prove that she could rise above the pettiness. One afternoon, as Ada returned from the market with her supplies, she found her mother waiting for her at the entrance of the hut. Maman-Ketch's face was lined with worry. "Ada," she began, her voice low, "Obora is not happy with your progress." Ada frowned. "What does he want from me, Mama? He took everything. What more can he take?" "He feels threatened," Maman-Ketch said. "Be careful, my daughter. Jealousy is a dangerous thing." Ada nodded, but inside, her anger simmered. She had done nothing wrong. Why couldn't Obora leave her alone? That night, Ada sat with her children, watching them eat the simple dinner she had prepared. Ifini looked up at her and smiled. "Mama, your Akara is the best in the whole village," he said, his eyes shining with pride. Ada chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Thank you, my son. But remember, it's not just the Akara that's important. It's the work we put into it." Ifini nodded, though he didn't fully understand. As Ada lay in bed that night, her mind raced with thoughts of the future. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to keep moving forward. For her children, for Chikeha's memory, and for herself. "I will not let anyone take our future away," she whispered to the darkness. And with that vow, Ada drifted into a restless but hopeful sleep. Wow, what a journey Ada has been through so far. What do you think will happen next? Do you think Ada will find a way to stand up to her in-laws, or will the challenges keep piling up? I'd love to hear your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. Stay tuned because the next part is coming soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when it drops. See you in the next chapter of Ada's incredible story.